Okay, if you have your Bibles, please turn with me to 1 Samuel 3, and we're going to talk about, just for a few minutes, how to create a mission home where we see kids prepared for the mission field and called to the mission field. And this is an important topic. We're seeing less, I think, folks surrendering to missions. Often the biggest deterrent to missions is the parents saying, I don't want my kid leaving our country or leaving our area or my home. I don't want our kids on the mission field. And so whether it's verbalized or not, sometimes that is a very real deterrent to getting people in different places around the world. So this is a story about a young boy by the name of Samuel. And God calls him, not in his teens or young adults, married. He's a young guy. And the child Samuel ministered, verse 1, unto the Lord before Eli. And the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. And it came to pass at that time when Eli was laid down in his place, and his eyes began to wax dim, that he could not see. And you think of Eli, his role as a spiritual leader, he's been very compromised. He has physical eyesight problems, but it really reflects in many ways his spiritual lack of vision and discernment and sight. So he has problems both literally and beyond. So he's having problems with his eyesight. And ere the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep. So, everything's going wrong. The lamp there is the lamp stand. So you have this six, whatever you want to call these things, with a central thing. This is the light system went out. So that's negligence. You to put a little bit of oil in there and keep it cooking. That was the priest's responsibility. And so this is a terrible failure. So it's a dark time spiritually. He's blind, spiritually blind, physically blind. It's dark. And little Samuel was laid down to sleep. That's pretty sweet. And it was at that point that the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, "Here am I." And as a young boy, he hears his voice, apparently audible, and he thinks, logically that it must be Eli calling for him. And so he runs to Eli and said, "Here am I, for thou callest me." And he said, "I called not. Lie down again." And he went and lay down. And the Lord called yet again Samuel. And Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I, for thou didst call me." And he answered, "I called not, my son, lie down again." And often people who are wrestling with a call to full-time missions, it's hard sometimes to discern the voice of God and the voice of man. So it's usually a process to know who's speaking. Sometimes, I think most spiritual men at one point or another have wrestled. Am I supposed to be a missionary? God, you want me to be a pastor, or you want me to do something like this? And the answer is not always a yes. Sometimes it's a test, and sometimes it's a yes. And in the Old Testament, you only had one tribe that was really basically set apart for ministry. It was the tribe of Levi. So 1 out of 12 men, maybe, was set apart for vocational ministry at the tabernacle, as was Eli. So here's this call from God. Still, Samuel doesn't connect it that it's God speaking to him. And even the spiritually sluggish Eli starting to put it together that something's going on here. So verse 7, now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, neither was the word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. And the Lord called Samuel again the third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here am I, for thou didst call me." And Eli perceived, boy, finally he's pretty thick, but he's starting to think, well, maybe it's the Lord. So Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, "Go, lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood and called as at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel answered, "Speak, for thy servant heareth." And the Lord said to Samuel, "Behold, I will do a thing in Israel, at which both the ears of everyone that heareth it shall tingle. And that day I will perform against Eli all things which I have spoken concerning his house when I begin. I will also make an end. For I have told him that I will judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knoweth, because his sons made themselves vile, and he restrained them not. And therefore I have sworn unto the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. And Samuel lay unto the morning and opened the doors of the house of the Lord. And Samuel feared to show Eli the vision. Then Eli called Samuel and said, Samuel, my son. And he answered, Here am I. And he said, What is the thing that the Lord hath said unto thee? I pray thee, hide it not from me. God do so to thee, and more also, if thou hide anything from me of all the things that he said unto thee. And Samuel told him everything, every whit, and hid nothing from him. And he said, If it is the Lord, let him do what seemeth him good. And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and did let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again in Shiloh, for the Lord revealed himself to Samuel in Shiloh by the word of the Lord. So a neat account of a young man, young boy, who discerns that God's speaking to him and is calling him for a unique ministry, in this case, a prophet. He will play a significant role in the history of Israel. So really, really neat. Now, I didn't get a lot of help from Eli. The message that God gave to Samuel, his first test as a young little called prophet was to tell the truth and all the truth, and he did it. And that was not easy to bear that news to Eli, that his family was going down, and that he was going down because of the horrific, indecent acts of his sons. And he let it, he tolerated it. He didn't restrain them. He didn't discipline them. He didn't challenge them and chasten them. No, he just let his boys run crazy. And we've seen that in ministries where the pastor or the missionary just lets their kids, just run like the devil and no restraint, unruly. Of course, that's a disqualification for the office of a pastor if the pastor lets their kids just be a terrible testimony for the Lord. So what we have here is a very interesting story about a young man called to the ministry. So I just want to take a few moments before Christy comes. She's meeting with the teens right now, and then she's going to be with us for a little bit, and then she's going to be with the children a little bit. So we're moving her to 3 locations, and we really thought that she would be a blessing to all of us. And we're thinking right now with her, with the young teens, here's a single woman who surrendered to God, serving him in another country. And what an example to our single girls, and what an example to really all of us here tonight. But let's just talk. I'd like to hear a few things that maybe you've tried to do in your home to cultivate an awareness of missions and to try to prepare your kids to go out of the house to serve God, whether it's here or abroad, but to create a mission-minded home. So what are some things that we can talk about or share that would lead to having a mission-minded family? Mission-minded family. What are some of the things that we would need to teach our kids? Yes, Marilyn. Okay, huge. If they see us praying for our missionaries and others, that means that's important. We care for them. We love them. It's humility on our part to trust God and to pray. Okay, great thing to do. Yep, Bob. Sure, go on a mission trip. So this Sunday night, the youth will be giving testimonies about the mission trip they just experienced. Nathan called me immediately the next morning, Monday morning, said it was the best trip we've had, I think, in the last 3-4 years. Tremendous spirit. The kids had a several-hour testimony time just praising God for the work he was doing. So you're going to hear some of that spillover on Sunday night. They went on a short-term, one week mission trip, but they went. And they were greatly used, have a lot of stories to tell. So you go on mission trips. So pray for missionaries. Go on a mission trip yourself. Okay, Bill? Okay, so, amen. So Bill Jump mentioned that they've opened their house as a means of hospitality to missionaries. And the fact is that they've had missionaries in their home that we now see on our prayer list, and missionaries we support financially. What a blessing to have that interaction where they get to meet a real missionary. Wow, your kids, you. Yep, great. Hospitality. We have a missions conference coming around the corner. There's always some housing needs. There's always meal needs. You'll see and hear sign-up lists for different things. Boy, jump on those opportunities. Don't wait. First come, first serve. Jump on the lines. And I would say if you're interested in hosting missionaries overnight or for a portion of a mission conference, um, now or in or other future events, please let Debbie know, because she has a list of some folks that have helped in the past. But that's a list, boy, if we can keep expanding that list, because sometimes we get calls last minute. And I don't mind putting people up in motels. We've done that a few times, but I would much rather put them in their homes, not just for the financial savings, but just for the experience you would get. And I think they would get, okay? Another thing to have a missionary. Yep, Rich.
I mentioned it before, but we read the YWAM series, Christian Heroes Then and Now, biographies on missionaries. And then on to and from church services, we listen to biographies too. We listen to God's Smuggler, we listen to Bruce Bill on Bruce Olson, a number of different.
So tremendous idea is to read missionary stories. In the set that Rich mentioned, some of the missionary stories, often the books that are written are adult level, very long in some cases. And, Adoniram Judson on the Golden Shore, whatever it's called, those are 400 plus pages. Those are long books. You might have a younger, if you bring up your kids, you probably don't want to read a 400 plus page book. So this series, what would you say the average length, Rich, of that series?
There are 14 chapters, and it usually takes me about 20 minutes to read.
Per chapter, and it's a different missionary in each chapter?
No,
or it's a life?
It's a book, 14 chapters, usually on one missionary, but I read a chapter a day after we are afternoon meal.
Okay. So here, Rich, they read a 15-minute block. That's fantastic. With the technology today, you can get these things on DVDs. You can listen to them in your vehicles. Hear missionary stories, tremendous. And read the missionary letters, another good thing to do. And they're expensive to mail, 50 plus cents a pop in many cases. So if you get a hard copy missionary letter, wow, that's someone's paying. We pay for some of our missionaries, at least one. We've done that for years, to pay for their mailings. And we hope that people are reading them. If you can get the newsletter electronically, that helps the missionary save a little bit of money. You still get it. You can still print it. You can still read it. But reading missionary letters is tremendous. Okay, Rich?
I just reached out and contacted G.S. Nair, and his contact actually sent us a book that arrived in the mail today.
Nice. Is it about G.S. Nair? Is it? All right. So G.S. Nair has an American who was very touched by his ministry in India and wrote a biography on G.S. Nair. So that is out now. I knew it was coming. Okay, so that's out. Fantastic. So G.S. Nair is one of our missionaries, was here with us not too many months ago. Fascinating individual, great ministry, not without its challenges. They've had a lot of health issues and other challenges. But reading a missionary newsletter is great idea. Great idea. Lisa. Yeah, we regularly and still try as we can. We've had a lot of international students and other minority, ethnic, whatever groups over. Some saved, some lost, and we've had many over for meal. And your kids get a burden for whatever groups of people you have in. And if they hear you witnessing to them, they learn pretty quickly. Hey, we got to pray for this. This is a great opportunity. Go ahead.
sorry. I guess I have gone on. Okay. This is exciting. But he said, Mrs. Sen, and he had this slow voice, Mrs. Sen, I am from mainland China. I have never heard these things before. And I have to think about these things. He'd never been confronted with the gospel. And so he had not gotten saved when we came out here. But we heard a year later through the ministry at UBC, one of the leaders in the Chinese work led Chongqing to the Lord. So he finally did get saved.
Yeah, so for our Zoom friends, Elise is telling stories about having international students, in this case, come into the home. And she told the story of Chongqing Lu. And our kids love Chongqing. He was a chemistry major. I don't think he was chemical engineer, but he was working on a PhD. Brilliant man. He came here. His wife came a few weeks or months before him to set up shop in faculty housing at Clemson. He came, knocked on the door. She finally came to the door, and he was surprised. She was there, but not alone. She was living with another Chinese postdoc. And so now here's Chongqing Lu. His wife's being unfaithful. He has no place to live. He tells her, where do I stay? I have no money. I have no place to stay. She says, oh, we have an extra guest room. So he stayed in the same apartment that was supposed to be his with his wife, and he stayed in the bedroom next to his wife and her new boyfriend until he could get his bearings, get his feet on the ground. The Chinese at that time were very, very poor. They didn't have any discretionary money. So we ran into Chongqing Lu, and probably we didn't handle it maybe IRS perfect, but we would employ him. He wouldn't take money. So we employed him, and he helped dig our heart pond. So in front of our house that we built, we had a water source, and he went down in front and built dug the formation of a heart. So the house would shine into the heart and reflect, it was always muddy. So the concept was good. The outcome was a disaster. But our kids loved Chongqing Lu. He helped John on a science project. I mean, he was the best guy to have in the house. His English was, broken English, but he was a scientist, and man, we just loved Chongqing Lu. And our kids prayed and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and then he gets saved after a year after we came out west. So one of those great stories. Yukong and Du, they had pictures of the tanks running over the Chinese students in the Tiananmen Square. I think was that one of the pictures? So you heard, no one was killed, there was no big deal. No, it was a real big deal. And if he got caught with those pictures, that would have been it for him. So, but your kids, I mean, you're reading it, which is fantastic. I think you should read it, but bring the stories in, the real bodies, like Bill was saying, bring these missionaries in, bring the mission field in, Okay. Other things we can do to have a mission-minded home. These are great ideas. Anything else? There's several others, I think, other ideas, but I'll mention a couple, but any others you can think of? Anything else? Seth, can the people on Zoom any answers? Is anyone out there you're thinking, man, I have an idea? Can they text it to you? I mean, message you up there on that? Anyone up there? Can they chat? Okay. Okay, yeah, if anyone wants to chit chat, please do. Any other things you can show about missions?
Dr. Sun, what's the question?
The question is, how can we build a mission-minded home? What are some things we can do in our homes with, a family that's mission-minded? Yeah, here.
Well, in Africa, some in Eastern, but in Africa, they're training missionaries, African missionaries, to go to Europe, to go to America, because we're not doing it anymore. American Christians, for lack of an adjective. So they're sending people to America, not to Europe, but a few to America. Find out who they are, support them, give them, aids, support, and,
Sure.
to help them charge us up so people can get saved here.
Amen. So Mark Slater is sharing how other nations are sending missionaries to other countries. Here we have the first Hispanic missionary from Mexico that we, in our circles, is Marco Polo Sapien. I mean, there's plenty of work still to be done in Mexico, but they felt, there's a lot of work going on being established. America needs a Hispanic missionary, so he came here. That's a big, big move. And so we started in Jerusalem, the church, and we went in 3 different directions. And let's say we went for Europe and now to our country, and we went to Asia. And now it's the Asians, Korea in particular, who are now getting the missionaries to go to other places, maybe back to the Mideast. So here's gone full circuit that they're going to have more effect in the Mideast than probably the American missionary. So very interesting things are happening around the world. Okay, Marilyn?
Yes. Give to missions. Let your children know you're giving. Let them give to the children of the missionaries. Have them participate in giving to missions from their allowance or whatever money they have.
Okay, fantastic. So obviously giving and teaching your children to give is great, but to teach them, hey, we have missionaries in, here's an offering you can give. And of course, if they have their own monies that they've earned or whatever, even better, to give money towards a missionary cause. Tremendous, tremendous. And to see you give is important. It's important. So we have Faith Promise or Faith Missions, whatever you'd like to call it. So our general fund budget ministers funds to our Jerusalem ministries here. Faith Promise then picks it up with Samaria and Judea and the uttermost parts. And so Faith Missions is our vehicle to help get monies to the 50+ missionary endeavors we support. So monies are helpful. Our giving's been really, really good. Really, really good. Praise the Lord for that. But to teach your kids to give, and you give, yeah, as an example, okay? Steve, are you thinking on an idea? You usually have, Steve, after all these services, he's usually ministering to us, but he usually comes up and says, I have a, what about this, or anything else you would share?
You could study, go abroad to study. So if a kid's in college, one of your children's in college, you could encourage them to live in a foreign country to study for a year. I know there are several people that have done that. I lived in Brazil for 1.5 years when I was in high school. That was an eye-opener on many fronts. So we saw how missionaries lived every day by living in the country for so long. So
And how was the soccer in Brazil?
oh my goodness, they know how to play soccer.
And what's the little soccer game called with that little ball?
Futebol de salão.
Yeah. So if you want your kids to learn soccer, learn another language, learn to be mission minded, put them in a school somewhere else in the world. Why not? Hermosillo down in the college in Hermosillo. We've had people not from here, but people around the country have sent their kids, or their kids have gone to college for a semester or a year, immersed in a Hispanic, Spanish-speaking, place. Wow, life-changing, absolutely life-changing. Great idea. See, I would have never thought of that. That's really good, Steve. You always have some creative idea. Do you have another one? That's it? Susan, how about you up there? You always, yes, you do. You've got something you're thinking on. Yeah, they're always serving us, but they have great ideas. Okay, anything else you can think of in serving our missionaries? Any other ideas? Making your home a missionary-minded home. Any other ideas? All right, these are a really great list. How many would like to share a missionary family or individual who's been in your home, something that you learned, picked up from them by their visit, whether it was for a meal or staying the night? You heard some story. I'll give you a story, but you can think while I'm giving a story. So we have friends, the Queters. Queters served in Indonesia. When the wall went down in China, well, they were in China many times, as have been their recent several decades of ministry. When Russia went down, when you could get into Russia as a missionary, wow, they were the first in line. But when they were in Indonesia, they were out in the jungles, and they were on a Jeep, and they were going down this terrible road from one village to the next, and there was a log across the trail. And they thought they had plenty of ground clearance, and they went up over the log and kept going. And he happened to look in his rearview mirror, and the log moved. And he told whoever was driving, if he wasn't, stop, that was not a log, that was a rather large something. Let's go back and look at it. And they'd killed it by hitting it. They'd killed it, so it moved and was there. And so he he got this monster snake, and had the head I think it was a poisonous snake. Was it king cobra? It was a really bad snake. It was a bad snake. They're all bad. They're all poisonous. Every snake you see is poisonous. This really wasn't. So he has this snake by his, this classic missionary picture, this monster snake by his head. And they measured it, and it was a world record. It was the largest of its kind. The problem is, for Guinness Book of World Records, you have to bring the evidence to different sites around the world to have them officially measure it for the record. So they did measure it, but they're not going to put it in their Jeep and carry it, but it was a record-breaking, length of a snake. So they finally put the thing down, they had their hee-haws, and then they drove, and when Tom again looked in the rearview mirror, the snake took off. So you're having dinner and Tom Queter's telling you that story. Do you think that, that was how many years ago, 30 years ago? Isn't that a great story? That's a mission story, man. That's missions, because you usually think if I'm going to be called to missions, I'll be in the dark continent with snakes. All right, someone else tell us a story, a memory, some impact, some truth, something that really impressed you by a missionary you had in your home. Yes. Okay. Yes.
I had a missionary from Guatemala in my home. We spent a lot of time with him because he was sent from our church, which was our sending church. So whenever he didn't have meetings, he was with us. And my mom purposely had him over a lot. So he was in our home. We called him our brother. But he told me that when he was studying Spanish, the word for pastor and the word for the person who takes care of sheep is pastor. And that was just like mind blowing to me. I was like, wow, I wish my English Bible doesn't say that. But it's very clear in Spanish that when Jesus says, I'm the shepherd of the sheep, I'm the pastor of the sheep.
Nice. Excellent. Nice. Yep. Another thought is to have the kids from the mission field come and live with you for a while. So we had a kid from the Azores we met over there. His name was Unuratu. Really nice family. His dad owned a bar. And before we left, he gave us all kinds. How many bottles did he give us of whiskey and whatever? 3 bottles. It was a really sacrificial gift. And what do you say? I mean, and we didn't drink it all at once, of course. So, but it was 3 bottles. I talked to the missionary. I said, what do I do? I mean, we're not going to drink it. I preach against it. I hate this stuff. So I hate what it did to my own family. So what do I do? He said, if you gave it back, that would really be offensive and would hurt our future ministry probably a little bit with them. So we didn't give it to anyone. I think we threw it out, whatever. But we had Unuratu come to the States and he stayed with us. And our kids were so excited to have him initially. But he stayed too long. And the kids, man, they just couldn't wait to get rid of Unuratu. So we were going to drive from Clemson, and he had a relative in Canada, and this is before cell phone, and he did not get the directions. Correct my story, but we're going to meet him and meet his relatives in Niagara Falls. Okay, we're going to come in from the New York side. They're going to come in from the Canadian side. And we're going to rendezvous and turn Unuratu over to his uncle, I think, his brother, who was like 100 years older. It was a big family, a lot of gaps. And so we got up there, but the problem was we didn't have the right phone numbers. We didn't have the right connections. We had no place to meet. And we really wanted to get rid of Unuratu, okay? And we weren't going to put him in a barrel over the falls. I mean, that was an idea. The kids thought of that one. I said, that's probably not a good idea. So here's Unuratu, and we're trying to find his brother. So what do we do?
Sorry. We went down a street.
The main street
near
from
the falls, I
the
believe.
main street from New York to Canada.
Right. And so I'm not sure why we were on that street, but we were on that street, and oddly there was a Greyhound bus or some kind of passenger bus that was at an angle in the middle of that street. And so we came upon one end of the bus and we looked up, and his brother was on the other side of the bus. So how that happened, only the Lord knows.
Yeah, so we met there and discharged our duties, but it was good. We don't know how much we impacted Unuratu's life. Missionary field kid in our home, America, Christian home, whatever. So who knows the impact? You don't know. Maybe Unuratu's a pastor now. I don't know. I've lost track. Okay, other stories, an impact from someone. Yep, go ahead, Darlene.
In 1980, my husband and I was traveling a lot in our motorhome, and we went to New York. And on the street, we met these missionaries. They were black missionaries. And he was a pastor, actually, of a church. But they did missionary work right on 42nd and Main Street in New York. And we helped them out up until he passed away 2 years ago now. And it was quite a thing because they sent us every month they sent us a letter, and they had pictures, just amazing pictures. I have to show you some of different people in New York, you can imagine, but they witnessed to, and then they always had a sign out there for pro-life, against abortion.
Wow.
And they did a wonderful work for 40 years, that I knew them. So
Amen.
that was
Amen.
we
Thank
helped
you.
to support them, of course.
Thank you,
all those
darling.
years.
Great story. Great impact. Okay, someone else, Elisa?
I have to mention this. We were in, I think it was Japan, with Loudermilk was the name of the,
Betty Loudermilk, yep, had an
Right.
orphanage.
but there was a lot of troubles as far as taking care of children. Anyway, there was a little lady that I met in the church, and this woman was very involved in the mission and the work and so forth. But one night she came in and she was carrying a baby, and I'll never forget because she had found the baby in a dumpster, and so she was going to adopt the baby herself, and I believe that's what she did. But the missionary stories that we read about people taking care of children, from Mary Slessor in Nigeria to Amy Carmichael in, I believe it was India, kind of an amazing thing. That's truly sacrifice.
Yeah, so Betty Loudermilk, an orphanage in Japan, unwanted children she'd pick up, in this case in a dumpster, adopts a child. She was a single woman, many kids. Great, very impressive. Pure religion and undefiled. Okay, someone else, story of a missionary that impacted you, your family, you had them in your home, you listened. Wow, what a story. Any other stories? Go ahead, Debbie.
In junior high, the Corley twins. I don't know if you heard of them, but
What twins?
the Corley twins, Ron and Don Corley, and they would go to the church and preach together, very identical. And when they preached, if you weren't looking, they preached the same message and they would switch out and you wouldn't even know it. But anyway, one time we had Dawn, I think it was, at our house for dinner. And anyway, then one time we went to New Mexico to visit the Corleys. And both the families have adopted some, because they work with the Navajo Indians.
Nice.
And they adopted like 2, and they already had a lot of kids anyway. And one of them, they would have a lot of college kids in their house and things like that, and helped with them. I thought that was just really neat.
Amen. Amen. Great. Thanks for sharing. Good stuff. Anyone else has a missionary story? Someone was in your home, you heard a story, impacted your family. Any other stories? I tell you have missionaries in, they're going to share something with you that really tugs at your heart and leaves a message for you to remember them, to pray for them. And if you've got kids, for you to have a missionary in when your kids are at home, woo-wee, this is prime time. They'll be on the edge of their seats listening to these stories. Some missionaries, you have to really work hard to draw it out of them. They don't want to share maybe all the stories, but some are quite ready to go. They're really, really fun. We've heard so many missionary stories over the years. I just love the stories from really all around the world. A lot of great memories. Okay, any other thought on that? Yep, Marilyn, okay. Okay,
A teacher at the same school that Paul was. She was a teacher at the same school that Paul was at. Martha Youngabord from Austria, and she was called to the mission field and left after going on deputation and everything when she was staying with us. That was a blessing.
nice. Yeah, having people live with you, and in this case, a major decision made in the home. That's great. That's great. Any other missionary stories? Okay, Diane?
Field from the college, way out. Anyway, it was Dave and Joanne Bailey, who I knew. And so when they came to church after they were off the field, Bill had not met them. And he said, "Hey, is that your car out there?" And the guy, your motorhome out there? And he said, "No." And he said, "Well, where are you living?" He said, "With our daughter and her husband and her 4 kids and her 2 dogs and a cat." And Bill said, "Would you like to come and live in our basement?" He said, "Yes." This is Dave Bailey. And so
This is Dave Bailey?
Dave Bailey, yeah.
You're
And
kidding.
so Bill said, "Are you sure you don't want to see it?" "Nope." He says, "You coming?" "Okay." And so they were there for a long time. Well, one time when we were out motorhoming, Dave and Joanne were there, we had said, "Our house is open for missionaries to come if they're in town." And sure enough, they came in from Mexico and they stayed with Dave and Joanne at our house for whatever the weekend or the week. They had a good time and it was nice. And we got a thank you note from them to both the hostesses and the hostess. But it
Amen.
was kind of fun. But Bill was so funny because he did not realize the relationship with Dave and Joanne.
Yeah, so Dave and Joanne Bailey, Joanne's Larry Robbins' sister.
Yeah.
So it's a Robbins connection there. And the Huffs, historically have had a lot of folks over for meals. Yep, and Bill loves ice cream. They usually have 2, 3, 4 half gallons, usually pretty accessible. They've dished out a lot of ice cream. When we just came here, man, and we had multiple ice cream nights over the Huffs, watching the Philadelphia Eagles one time. They had a lot of ice cream that night as they lost. So sad state of affairs. Well, we are waiting for Christy. I don't know if she is in the hall, and maybe she thinks I'm not done my quote message. So if you could just check there, Steve. She's supposed to be in here. I don't want to, she's waiting for me. Okay. Yeah, it reminds me of, Spurgeon, when he was a young man after high school, went to interview at a college to see if he would be welcome to study there. Who wouldn't want Spurgeon to study at their school? He was a brilliant kid. He had an A in all the classes, F on the gym, F at recess. So he got an F in recess. He was a fat, chunky kid. He was brilliant, photogenic memory. But he went off to this college. I forget the name of it. Came and met the receptionist. She was blonde. And this isn't picking on blondes, and she may not have been blonde, but it makes a better story. She met the secretary, and she said, "Mr. Spurgeon, we're expecting your visit. The president will meet with you soon." And she put him in a room. And then the president came out and said, "I'm waiting to meet a candidate for the school here." And she said, "Well, why don't you wait, sir, over in this room?" So she put the president in a room and Spurgeon in a room, and they both waited what seemed like forever. And Spurgeon in that room came under conviction saying, "You know what? Jeremiah 45, he said, where Baruch says, 'Seekest thou great things for thyself? Seek them not.' He said, 'I'm seeking great things for myself to get this education. Seek them not. I'm going to just leave and not go to college.'" And he walked out and left, never did go to school. And he did okay without it. But that receptionist, I don't know if she had a job after that evening. So I didn't want her out there waiting, and I'm waiting in here, and I'm stalling is what I'm doing right now. So we're stalling. So she was supposed to be here a few minutes ago. So would you like to hear more missionary stories? because we're going to pray after she gives her presentation. Yeah. I can give you good stories if you like. Pick a continent. We'll pick a story. Go ahead, Elisa, with it.
The Shaler family, they had a daughter my age, and she grew up in the jungles of South America. And so she would get on the bus well, not initially. I have to say, her father passed away. He contracted hepatitis in Venezuela, and within 10 days, he was gone. And so the family suffered that loss. She also had a little brother he was older than her, but he was young, and he fell into the Orinoco River and he passed away. And then a year and a half after they arrived here in the States, Sarah had become my friend, and I really resented her brother, Philip, because I wanted Sarah to sit with me on the bus. I wanted her to talk to me, but Philip always saved her a seat, and she chose to sit with her brother, which really amazed me because my brothers would not save me a seat. If we were at home and they wanted the seat I was sitting in, if we were watching television or something, my brother, I'm going to tell on Les. Les was the one, he'd push me out of my chair, sit in it, and laugh at me because he just took my chair. So when Philip saved Sarah a seat on the bus and they seemed to enjoy each other so much, it just got my attention. But Philip, he passed away a year and a half after they arrived in the States. He had a sledding accident and ruptured his spleen, so he passed away. So Sarah started sitting with me, and then she would tell me every day. I felt like I could write a map of the little town of Tamatama that was in the jungle. She had talked so much to me about it, but she also loved her pastor. She loved her church, and she would tell me about that love. And she said, well, you need to come and meet my pastor. You need to come and see my church. And it was like, well, finally, after I'd heard so much of her saying that, I decided I should. And it was after meeting Sarah that I really came to know the Lord, and my Christian walk started to take off when I started attending choir and youth meetings and so forth, largely because Sarah bent my ear and wouldn't let go. But Sarah passed away when she was about 22 years old. And so a lot of it due to a disease they'd picked up in the jungle. And so I've always looked back in those days. They're very precious to me, and the things that transpired. So, but Sarah, that was another story. So.
Thank you, Elisa. So it's interesting for both of us, before we were saved, we had missionaries that actually were witnessing to us and pushing us towards the Lord. So the Shaler family, New Tribe family, and then Luella Keener, the lady that taught the ladies' Bible study, her husband was Layman Keener. They were both from the Mennonites background, and depending which Mennonite branch you're with, some are very legalistic works. You're not saved by faith, and they came out of a works Amish/Mennonite background, totally ostracized, treated as dead. Layman was a great businessman, but the Lord got a hold of their hearts and called them to special mission trips, kind of with like New Tribes, and maybe at times with New Tribes. Their job description was to go to difficult mission fields where missionaries were having problems, filling in gaps for them. They took on the most difficult assignments for their mission, and they shared stories. Very hard to get a story out of them. Very hard to get a story. They would later write a book called the Keener Team, which we have a copy. I keep hearing noises. Yeah. So I would ask them to tell stories, and the one I've shared in a sermon, I'll repeat it. And I'm a young Christian now. I'm drawing it. Hello, ladies. Hello, folks. And the story goes that they were in a very primitive area. The people they were trying to reach, they were cannibals. very hostile group of people. And on one night that the Keeners heard the drums pounding and escalating, and they knew that the next step was they would have visitors at their little thatched cottage, but they couldn't keep out anything, hardly could keep out an insect. And they knew that probably that night they would be martyrs for the faith, and that all they could do, they weren't going to escape it. They got on their knees and they just prayed, Lord, if you want to take us home tonight, you take us home tonight. If you want us to stand and preach the gospel and preserve us, whatever you want to do, Lord. And they just gave it over to God. And they came out rather than wait for them to, all these guys all marked up and painted up, and they're coming to kill them. They went outside their thatched cottage and met them in the little trail in front of the place. And Layman greeted them warmly and tried to talk about Jesus. And they all stopped, and they turned and they all ran. And Layman is he's strong, but he's very slender. He's built like Troy, probably the same size as Troy. And that doesn't mean that he was wimpy. He was a good size, whatever that size is. But he wasn't Arnold Schwarzenegger, is the point, okay? And Luella had all kinds of health problems. She was not a threat. But they ran. And they just went back. The Keeners went back in their cottage. They praised God for preserving them that night. They didn't know what was in store. But that was the turning point to that village. And they were able to go into the village and get the gospel again to the people. And people got saved left and right, almost the entire village. And later, as they were mentoring these new converts, they did ask, about that night you came, what was your intentions? Oh, we were coming to kill you. Well, we knew that. But what happened that night? You all turned and ran. And they said, well, the problem was the army that was standing behind you with the swords, the spears. They said we were no match to them. I mean, there was just too many of them compared to us. And so we did the obvious. We ran for our lives. So what host was that? Okay, very impressive story. Christy Cole, it's great to have you. Would you come and share about your work? Good to have your folks here with us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you tonight. Some of you probably know my parents who go to your church. And I'm going to give an unusual testimony tonight. I am on furlough right now. I'm a missionary in France. I've been there for 13 years. And I have quite a few supporting churches in Colorado. So I've been visiting a lot of them over the past several weeks. But I am fully supported. So I'm not coming to your church seeking more support. The Lord has provided richly for me. But tonight, what I want to do is, God's word says to give honor where honor is due. And I want to express my gratitude to you for your investment in some other missionaries in France who have made a huge impact on my life. How many of you know Steve and Rowena Barnes? Okay, now you might not realize how much other missionaries are blessed by their ministry. So before I show you my little video, I wanted to just mention a few ways in which your investment in them has made a difference in my life in serving the Lord in France. When I was in Bible college, two of the Barnes kids were there at the same time, Philip and Anna. And Anna was a good friend of mine. And through Anna, I got to meet Steve and Rowena. And I remember very clearly when they came to visit their kids in college, I talked to them about my interest in France. And I said, is there a need in France for missionaries who have training in music? And Pastor Barnes said, definitely. There's a big need for that. However, it's not something that you could do short term. You would need to be there long term to really help us. And I did not forget that. Years later, when I came back full time, I said, I don't know if you remember telling me that, but here I am. So that was one way in which that counsel he gave me was a big help. Also, when I first arrived in France in 2008, I had no idea how complicated it would be to find housing for a few months in the Paris area. I had already studied French in spurts in France, but coming back full time, I knew I needed 5 or 6 months of language school. I had no idea that it's almost impossible to find a place to live in Paris for just 6 months. But the Barnes knew that. And when they knew I was coming, they said, how about you stay with us? You can live with us. And after about 6 weeks, we're going to be on furlough and you can house sit for us. So it worked out beautifully for me and for them. And they helped introduce me to all sorts of things and help me get settled. And that was a big provision of God, a place to live when I was in language school. And then several years later, Pastor Barnes, in talking with me about some of my ministry projects that I was beginning, he said, Christy, you really should think about starting an association. Now, I don't think we have the exact equivalent here in the States, but an association in France is like a nonprofit organization, and you have to get it approved, and that's the way you can have a separate bank account. He said, you're going to need to have a separate bank account for these ministry projects. And I don't know if I would have had the courage to launch into something like that without his counsel and his input. He's really the one that gave me the courage to say, go for it. And he even suggested the name, which is Éclat Musica, from church music. And you'll see that in my presentation. So Pastor Barnes was a huge encouragement to me in giving me the right advice at the right time. I could mention so many other things, but a big one, you may remember that they served for many, many years in Saint-Denis, or it looks like Saint Denis, if you read it in the English pronunciation. They were there for many, many years in the suburbs of Paris in a very rough area. And they have now turned that church over to to several national pastors. And that church in Saint-Denis has now started its own church. And that's the church I'm serving in. So the core group of people that they discipled, that they trained, they are part of my local church. And you cannot imagine how much easier it is to plant a church in France when you have a group of people like that. I mean, the Sunday school teachers had been trained by Rowena, and her training is like world-class training. And people in all these different ministries had been mentored by the Barnes for many, many years. And that's who I'm serving with in my local church. And God has blessed our church plant. So in fact, I think he's speaking at my church next Sunday there. They come and visit regularly and even stay in my apartment. And then one final thing I'll mention before the video. I have been doing studies in ethnomusicology, which is the study of music and culture and how they relate to each other, in the desire to not only be better equipped to help with church music in France and very multicultural churches, but also in non-Western countries to be able to help them develop their own worship music and not translate it, but help them write their own. And I had to do a big thesis project. And the Lord helped me finish it. Despite COVID, it was very complicated. I couldn't travel. Then I couldn't even travel in France. I ended up doing it over Zoom, and Pastor Barnes participated in it. He said he would be willing to attend the workshop, which I know was a sacrifice for him. He is extremely busy, but he felt it was important to encourage me and to participate in that. That was just a few months ago. So from before I went to France all the way through right now, they have had a huge impact on me, have been a big blessing to me, and I'm just one of many. So I do want to thank you for your investment in their ministry for many, many years, I'm sure. They've been in France a long time, for the way that the Lord has used your investment in them to help me in my ministry in France. So we'll finish with my little video presentation. The Lord exhorts us in Hebrews 12, verse 1, to run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto him, the founder and perfecter of our faith. And that's exactly what we are trying to do here in France, one step at a time. I was blessed to be born into a family that's been running the race of faith for many generations. As soon as I was old enough to talk, my parents taught me the ABCs of the gospel. The Lord convinced me in my childhood that I was running the wrong direction away from him. I'm so thankful that he brought me to repentance and saved me. As I grew up, I heard countless missionary presentations. I knew that there were some countries that had lots of gospel runners, but others had very few. And I told the Lord that I was willing to run wherever he wanted me to run, but I was particularly interested in the race in secular post-Christian Europe. And that's exactly where he sent me in 2008. 6 years ago, God provided a home for me here in this apartment complex. He has enabled me to get to know many of my neighbors, one conversation, one English club at a time. During our COVID lockdowns, I had some fantastic opportunities for gospel conversations, partly because we were all stuck here. A Turkish couple lives on the 4th floor of my building, and for 4 years, they really kept their distance from me. But I waited and prayed and looked for opportunities to show them kindness. And little by little, I saw their attitude towards me completely change. And now I consider them quite good friends. Recently, they invited me for game nights 2 weeks in a row. And both times, they asked me to please explain again my faith. 3 years ago, the Lord provided this amazing building for our church family. And it's just a mile from my home. We have looked to him to provide the funds to purchase it by the deadline, the end of 2021, and we're so close to the goal. What a thrill it has been to see God provide €1 at a time. My coworkers, Tim and Ruth Bixby, are such a blessing to all of us in our race. They're like running coaches, exhorting us, teaching us how to better run with our eyes on the Lord. One sermon, one Bible study, one lesson at a time. Christ is building his church here in Sarcelles, one disciple at a time. Fatiha from North Africa has been attending our church for over 2 years, and little by little, one step at a time, we saw the Lord do a work in her heart. She has now made a profession of faith and has requested baptism. Believers from many, many nations are attending, some have joined, some have begun serving faithfully. It is such a blessing to see them grow in maturity and stability in their race. Summer after summer, a network of women spend their days along this highway trying to entice men. But summer after summer, a group of our ladies are running after them, telling them about our merciful, holy Lord. He is able to lay hold of them and make them a new creation. My race sometimes takes me to other parts of France, especially as I try to coordinate projects for the Éclat Musica team. We desire to help French-speaking churches with their ministries of music and evangelism. The theme of our conference in 2019 was how can we better encourage and equip the young musicians in our churches. In January of this year, we held our first Zoom seminar, and we're thrilled to have 50 participants from 27 local churches. Churches in Orléans and Reims have requested help for their musicians recently. Each task, each time I look to the Lord for direction. Sometimes my race even goes beyond French borders. In 2019, I was in Tbilisi, Georgia, for a music seminar with Central Asian church leaders. When other trips were put on hold in 2020, I decided to just focus on finishing a master's in ethnomusicology, one homework assignment at a time. Lord willing, I'm now better prepared to help non-Western churches with their music as well. I thank the Lord for each of you who pray and who support me financially so that I can run the race here in France one step at a time. Perhaps the next time you put on your tennis shoes, you'll be reminded to pray for us here in France. Please pray that we would not allow sin to weigh us down and entangle us. Pray that we would not get distracted in this race, that we would keep our eyes on Jesus. Some days this race is very long and very hard. Please pray that we would wait on the Lord who renews our strength. Merci beaucoup.